I'm not sure if I should admit this or not, but I am crushing on the worship leader really hard this morning. Like serious crush that I've got on today's worship. And just in case, there's some guests here. They're like, well, that was awkward. That's my wife, actually. We've been married going on 23 years, and today's just a special. My heart's full. My wife and my daughter's standing next to her, my son behind them. Today, my heart's full, so I'm trying to fight back the emotion, just not only the sweet spirit of the songs, but also just seeing the beauty of being able to do ministry with my family. So I count that such an honor, such a joy. And thank you for being a part of it. Thanks for singing. There's one thing that I've realized the more that I travel, the more that I pull my suitcase off of the top shelf in my closet, something happens every time. I reach up and I grab my suitcase and I put it down, and instantly, like I don't know if this happens to you, but like all of a sudden anxiety just instantly, like inside myself, my inside Dustin is saying, you know, you're forgetting something. It's like I haven't even stinking opened the suitcase, but the whole time I'm packing, there's like this lingering thought, you know you're forgetting something. And I don't feel like it's one of those things that I can swing by Walgreens wherever I'm going and pick up. It's way deeper than that. Like I feel like I'm forgetting something, and so it's like something inside of me is saying, you know you're forgetting something. What's the point of the trip? At this, you know, like you're forgetting the one thing that you need that's central to this trip. Maybe you've had the same thing. It's like when you go to take a vacation, when you go to get out of the house, like you're almost to the airport and you're like, I don't think I locked the door. I just don't remember. And like you call your kids like, hey, will you go check, make sure I locked the door? We're about to board a plane. Your kids are like, Dad, it's 6 a.m. and you've been locking the door for 60 years. I know you locked the door. And they go check, and of course you locked the door. But we had this feeling that maybe we're forgetting something. That's where we find Paul today, but the stakes for the people that Paul are with are incredibly higher. See, for me, I just feel like I'm forgetting something, and sometimes I am forgetting something. Many times I'm not. I just have this nagging feeling. But Paul, he lands in Athens. He's on a boat, and he gets off in Athens, and he's with people that have a much bigger problem than just forgetting something while they're packing. They are afraid that they forgot to appease a god. They forgot to honor one of the gods. So let me read it to you. We're going to start here, and then I'll back up a bit. But in Acts chapter 17, verse 22, I'm going to get right into it today. So Paul, standing before the council, addressed them as follows. Here's what he said. Men of Athens, I noticed that you are very religious in every way, for as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines, and one of your altars had this inscription on it. Read those 4 words with me. To an unknown God. This God, Paul says, whom you worship without knowing, is the one that I'm telling you about. Paul gets off a boat in Athens, and he's with people that are so afraid of forgetting one of the many gods that they have altars and shrines to all throughout the city. I read as I was studying for this message, at one time, 30,000 statues of gods beautified the city of Athens. 30,000 attempts to try to honor and appease all the many gods that the Greeks had. And yet in the midst of those were these statues that also said, these altars that said, to an unknown God, just in case we are forgetting a God. We don't want to make a God mad. We don't want to risk not recognizing a God. So they have these altars all throughout the city. Today, done a lot of work to try to figure out, God, what do you specifically want to say to your church today? And I have 2 things. There's 2 things that I want to do today and hope that we can unpack a little bit more together. The first thing is that all around us, people are still building things and even building their life on things that will never really go the distance. Trying to find purpose and trying to find a sense of value and hope in their life. They're trying to close the gap from what they feel about themselves and who they want to be. And they're building these things to trying to appease a sense of self-worth and self-value. And all around us, a similar thing is happening. It's in our neighborhoods, it's in our cul-de-sac, it's in our city, where people are trying desperately to build something in hopes of being more or accomplishing more, and those things are going to fail them. And then the second thing that I noticed that I want to talk about today is that in our lives, we are supposed to be building something. And I want to talk about the things that we build. So what do we build as the church if we're ever going to be able to engage culture, which is what the theme of this month is about? The series is called This Is Our City. And really what we're doing is taking a month to unpack what do we mean when we say we want to engage culture. And I believe that in order to engage culture well, we need to be a people that are building some things. And we'll talk about what it is that you and I can be about building. So back to Paul. So Paul gets off in Athens, and even the journey to Athens is an interesting one. He's chased out of 2 different cities sharing the gospel. And finally, in Berea, the believers were once again concerned for Paul, so they put him on a boat, and he ends up in Athens. And Athens is a beautiful city. I've never been there, but I've seen pictures, and even preparing for this message, I just did a lot of research on the city of Athens, and what a beautiful city. And Paul gets off the boat, and we're going to look in Acts chapter 17. We're going to jump back to verse 16. And in verse 16, when Paul gets off of the boat, we don't read about what he traveled to see. We don't see, he doesn't have like a selfie stick and binoculars trying to be a great tourist. He actually doesn't leave any word to us about the awe-inspiring Pantheon, which, as I just kind of rabbit-holed Athens, what an incredible structure that is. In Acts chapter 17, verse 16, when Paul starts to unpack his story about Athens, he doesn't talk about the ancient citadel of Acropolis. That would be awesome, but he doesn't do that. Here's what Paul says. While Paul was waiting for them, he's waiting for Silas and Timothy in Athens, he was deeply troubled by all of the idols that he saw everywhere in the city. I got to be honest, this is one that I had to chew on for a bit. It's one that I was kind of convicted about a little bit, that Paul's emotional, the temperature of his emotions shifted because he saw that people were away from God. I wrote it this way: Paul had an emotional response to their relationship with the truth, that they had a broken understanding of the truth, of the way, who is Jesus. And Paul, it says that he was deeply troubled, and I got to tell you, I really want to be more like Paul. It's so easy for me to just worry about me, and when brokenness is all around me, or as people are far from God, or they're distant in their understanding of who Jesus is, I really want to be moved by that. I want to see a need, that I would be moved by people's lack of understanding in who Jesus is. It reminds me of a lyric to a song that I used to sing a bunch. It's an older worship song, but in the bridge of the song called Hosanna, it says, "Break my heart for what breaks yours. Everything I am for your kingdom's cause." You ever thought about that lyric, and especially in the lens of how Paul felt? God, I've had to pray this week, and I'll be honest with you, it's a prayer that I don't regularly pray, but I've had to pray, God, break my heart. If it breaks your heart, I want it to break mine. If it troubles you, I want it to trouble me. And Paul, he was deeply troubled because he saw that they were going after God, but they were just doing it in all the wrong ways. Maybe Paul knew the psalmist's words in Psalms 119, 104. It says this: "For your truth is the source of my understanding, not the falsehoods of those who don't know you, which I despise." And this is an important verse to read correctly. You know, a misplaced modifier on this sentence, and it sounds as if the psalmist is saying that I despise the people. But that's not what the psalmist is saying. It's not the people that the psalmist despises. It's the falsities that are leading them away from knowing Jesus. And that's an important distinction that you and I make, because it's so easy. You know how many times we all know it. Maybe as I say this, maybe it's going to land in a drawing you out of this, maybe a convicting way. Maybe this is you. You just pop off on social media telling people how they should live, and that's not okay, and that's not how you should do that thing. But that's not at all the invitation. The invitation is not to despise the people. It's to despise the fact that they're away from God. They don't understand the truth, and it hasn't taken root in their life. And I bet he knew the psalmist's words, because what I wrote down, this is just a way for me to couch it in my own brain. Paul doesn't do ministry out of his frustration for the way people treated God, but out of a deep sense of compassion for what God had already done for the people. It's an important distinction. It's important, and sometimes we can be so frustrated at what people are doing, and so we go into fix-it mode for what they are doing, but it's not about us telling them what they should do. It's about helping them understand what's already been done. Amen. It's helping them embrace and receive the love of God that is revealed through Jesus, and we don't need to be in behavior police mode. We need to be in making Jesus much mode. Somebody say amen. Thank you, my dude. So we see, I want to pass forward. Let's reread the verse that we already read. I want to take a different look at it. Verse 22. So Paul, standing before the council, addressed them as follows. Men of Athens, I noticed that you are very religious in every way, for as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines. And one of your altars had this inscription on it: to an unknown God. This God whom you worship without knowing is the one that I'm telling you about. You notice that Paul doesn't give the message while kicking down idols. He doesn't start like lighting altars on fire and telling them how useless that all of these things are. He doesn't come across like, unknown God? Are you kidding me? Have you not looked up in the heavens? He doesn't ridicule them. He actually begins by acknowledging the work that they've done to discover on already. He says, men of Athens, he actually compliments them. I notice you care a lot about religion. You care a lot about the things of God. And Paul's, in essence, you hear like a little bit of like, I admire that. I admire your tenacity to know religion and to understand the gods. In fact, I would even go as far as to say, Paul, if you continue reading in chapter 17, like Paul quotes their own poets. He quotes their own poets, but he takes their own poetry that they loved and valued, and he spins it in a way to point them to Jesus. He's not trying to undress them publicly. He's trying to point them to a deeper way to see what God has already been doing. And that maybe that God, partnered with Paul, could bring a fresh understanding to the things that he's already been doing. When I read this, it reminded me a lot. I mention it from time to time. Of course, it matters a lot to me, and it's something that many of you have been a part of and have supported. But in 2018, me and some friends, when we started that Storytellers deal, and there's some new faces in the room, so the short version of a long story is Storytellers is this thing that me and some friends started in 2018 where we do nights of worship in clubs and bars and venues all throughout the city, and it's been incredible to watch the move of God in those places. But I was thinking, and I'm grateful for this. I don't know what your relationship is with alcohol or with drinking, but let's just say that you are opposed to it, or let's say one of the things that we can agree with that the Bible is clear on is that we should really abstain from just getting hammered and from drinking so much that we don't have control of ourselves. That we can at least agree on that. But what I didn't do is call the club owners and say, hey, first off, if there are drunk people in there, you should know that is not the way of the Lord. So if you got drunk people in there, you should right off the bat know that this is not the better way, and I think you should manage your alcohol and your drinking a bit better for your patrons. Now that we've established that, can I come in and do a night of worship? No. Here's how the conversation went. Literally, the conversation went, since you guys have an epic venue and there's going to be people in there already, you got a stage and no one's booked this particular night. Can me and some friends come, and it's a little off the beaten path, but we want to do the style of music that we do, which is worship music, and we'll bring some friends. You're already open. We don't want to disrupt what you're doing at the bar. We don't want to disrupt what you're doing for your patrons. We really just want to be there and share our story in that space. I think it's going to be a great night. And we were met from day one with arms wide open, and have been extended invitations to virtually every venue throughout the city. Why? Because we didn't begin with how wrong that they were. We started with, we just want to partner with you. We want to walk with you. Does that make sense? That's an important part of being able to engage culture well. Because see, these people that Paul is talking to, they were experts when it comes to gods. The Greek gods, 12 major gods. So right now, as Paul is giving this message, they're basically saying, look, sir, when it comes to gods, we've got the market cornered. I wrote down some: Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite. I mean, they're like, we got the God thing down. And Paul doesn't disrupt their understanding of God. He speaks specifically to the fact that there was one place in their story that they were unsure about. And Paul says, that's where I want to talk to you. And the interesting thing is I don't think we're too far different. I don't think our culture is too far off the beaten path of these people in Athens. In fact, Paul was chased out of 2 cities to get to this city. And if you read the story, in this city, they actually were excited to hear from him. They invited him in. They liked the idea of information. And family, we live in an information crazed era, right? So here's what I've realized. And you please don't, I'm not a spiritual giant. I'm just trying to do some things different in my life and be better at some things in my life. But like one of the things I try to do is when I feel the Holy Spirit impressed for me to pray with somebody, like I say, okay. It's not necessarily always an easy okay. Sometimes it's like, but do I have to? God, I really don't. This is awkward and it's uncomfortable. But there have been so many times sitting in a bar, the guy sitting next to me, and he's telling me a story, and I'm just like, hey man, can I pray with you? And whether it be that guy or sitting at a table with some friends, and the waitress comes by, and I'm like, hey, we're going to be praying in a minute. Anything that I can pray for you about before we go to prayer? And there's been people, outside late after a show or a club, and somebody just starts to talk to me. And instead of doing the whole, praying for you, I'm learning to go, can I pray for you right now? And can I tell you something? In every one of those instances, I'm not saying that it won't happen at some point. It might happen at some point, but in every one of the instances I've done that, it's not been thousands, but it's been way more than I could count. I have never had someone say, man, get that crap out of here. I've never had someone say, no, you can't pray with me. Who do you think you are? I have never had anything other than usually, yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, thank you. I'm not saying it's not a little awkward, but I have never had someone say, get that crap out of here. In fact, what I've had people do is in that moment, they feel like that they matter at a different level than they felt like they've mattered in a long time, that someone would care enough about them to endure the awkwardness and to go right in the middle of that and to say, I see you, I care about you, and I have an answer for what you're going through, and his name is Jesus. And I've never, ever, ever had someone despise that. Instead, I've had people welcome that. And this is what I see Paul doing here with the people of Athens. They're welcoming him in, and our culture is not much different. Here's what I think some of the things I wrote down that our culture does. If you've ever been on social media, then you know we have this craze to try to project a lifestyle, right? Like we have this desire to all of our highlight reels go on there, and the problem with that is not only do we project an unrealistic lifestyle, but we also we're inundated with unrealistic lifestyles. And I wrote down some things that I think that people build in place of going after something that only Jesus can provide. I wrote some down. Maybe this. Here's the influence that you really want. And if you had this influence, man, can you imagine the kind of respect that you'd have? And could you imagine what you could accomplish with this kind of influence? Or maybe here's what success looks like. So you got to go after this thing. If you want to be successful, you want to be respected, you want to have everything you need. This is what success looks like. This is the house that you need to live in to live the good life. This is the car you should drive. This is the lifestyle you've been dreaming of. Your kids will love you so much more if you'll do this or get this for them. This is the man that will forever fix your loneliness. If you could find a man like this, you would no longer be lonely anymore, and it would kick your loneliness once and for all. Or maybe for the dudes, a woman like this, that's everything you need. Can you imagine having a woman like this? Here's the destination vacation that you better not miss. This is the dream retirement you're working towards. Here's what happiness looks like. This is true peace. There's no security like financial security. And if I buy this thing, it'll change the game for me. It'll fix my depression or my anxiety here for a moment. And we are constantly inundated with people chasing things that we know will leave them empty. And maybe you're like me, and some of these things are red. And it's not about the city of Sacramento that builds these things. Maybe you're like me, and you're like, no, I have a tendency to build some of these things too. I have a tendency to believe some of these lies as well, and we begin to build things that are never, ever, ever going to satisfy. The problem with those things is that they are not only unattainable and lies, but we settle for the low-hanging fruit that we can get to because we can't get to those things. And so we settle for low-hanging fruit, and these are the altars that we build and that those all around us begin to build. I'll say it like this. We really can't afford the house, so we live financially strapped. We want the car, so we pick up the second job that only makes us even more distant to our families. Got to get it, that low-hanging fruit somehow. We want the influence, so we bury ourselves in social media while our kids grow up when we're not looking. We want to be respected, so we project a lifestyle that we know isn't true, and it actually is leaving us even more empty. We want to enjoy retirement, but we kill ourselves and the relationships around us trying to get there, so we spend 60 years miserable and then 10 years of retirement lonely. We want the value and identity that a man or woman can never actually give, so we bounce from relationship to relationship to relationship, dissatisfied and brokenhearted. We want a love life that isn't even real, so we turn to pornography. We feel lonely and purposeless, so we waste our life in meaningless scrolling and meaningless shopping. We can't find the peace or the happiness we long for, so we self-medicate with things like drugs and alcohol. See, we're going to need to fill this insatiable need that we have. But family, here's the crazy thing. There's only one thing that can fill that, and his name is Jesus. And all around us, people are erecting these hopeful ideas that maybe this is where the purpose will come from. Maybe this is where the hope will come from. Maybe this is where the identity will come from, or the respect of others will come from. Maybe this is where I won't have to stress as much if I have financial security, or if I land that position, or if I have this type of influence. There's those things. Even when you attain those things, have you ever read the reports of prominent people, successful people, people with lots and lots of zeros after their name that are miserable, some of which are miserable to the point of suicide because they killed themselves to get something and they got it and it wasn't enough. And that happens all around us, and sometimes it happens in our life as well. Thursday, I got the chance to go to lunch with a friend of mine, and if I'm being transparent, this friend of mine, the times that all the conversations we had in the past where he was high on meth and drunk a lot of alcohol, was pretty hammered. And I met him because he came to church at Impact. And he comes into Impact just trying to figure things out, but by his own testimony, he kind of knew his life was a mess and he was looking for some purpose, and the North Star was a church, and so he stumbled into our church, but yet his life was just so riddled with addiction that I never really had a conversation with him that wasn't, it wasn't pretty obvious that substances were driving the majority of the conversation. In fact, since the time that we met, my friend has tried to kill himself a couple different times. Within the last couple of months, was hammered and was drinking and rear-ended somebody, totaled his truck and got pretty messed up. To make matters even more crazy, drank too much alcohol, shot up meth, and thought that playing with fire and rubbing alcohol would be a smart thing. And it blew up, literally. And he's got burns on his face and his side and his arms. And he spent weeks in the burn unit at the hospital. Even while in the hospital, this is a couple months ago, even while in the hospital, found a way to get meth smuggled in so he could still get high while he's in the hospital. And I had lunch with him on Thursday, and he's 45 days clean then, 48 days today. Yeah. And while I was talking to him on Thursday, I mean, it was a different dude. It wasn't even the same guy. And the sense of joy and purpose that this guy had, let me explain something to you. There's still consequences for the gnarliness of the decisions that we make before we turn our lives over to Jesus and begin building something that matters. All of the things that we build many times have brutal consequences to them. So listen to me. He's still jobless because he got fired. Okay, he still totaled his truck. He's still in a lot of pain. His scars from the burns didn't magically go away. They're still there. Oh, but now he has purpose that he never had before. And this is the crazy part. This is the thing that blew my mind about our conversation. He said, Dustin, I have tried to tell my testimony every single day since 45 days is when he told me the story. And 48 days ago now is when he's looking at himself in the mirror. His life was just completely a wreck, and he begins to pray and say, God, I need to figure this thing out. If you can work with me, I'll give myself to you. I don't want to continue doing this. I want to be set free from these things. I need a fresh wave of purpose in my life, and right now I'm saying I'm done with this stuff. And he filled up a trash bag, all the paraphernalia, all of the things in his life that he was constantly giving way to his addictions, and he throws it in the dumpster. That was 48 days ago. Still, the consequences still exist, but he says, ever since I gave my life to Jesus 48 days ago, I have tried to share my testimony every single day because I want somebody to know that they're not too far gone. Their life's not too far messed up. Here's what he said. He said to me over lunch, he said, you know what? I don't think I shared my testimony yesterday. Oh, that bothers me. How many days go by where I don't tell people what Jesus is doing in me? Way more than a day. Has a testimony. He has a story. And when we have a testimony, that's what we use to tell people what our God is capable of. Let me read this verse to you. In Psalm 73, it says this, then I realized that my heart was bitter and I was all torn up inside. I was so foolish and ignorant. I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you, yet I still belong to you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, leading me to a glorious destiny. Whom have I in heaven but you? I desire you more than anything on earth. My health may fail, my spirit may grow weak, but God remains the strength of my heart, and he is mine forever. And this is the story worth telling. This is the news that I so desperately want my neighbors and my family and my coworkers and those that sit in the classroom and those that work for me and those that I work for and my kids and my spouse. This is the news that I want them to know. Can I tell you what makes that so easy? I learned this from my friend Jason. You got to have a testimony. You got to say, this is what God's doing in my life. And if I was to say to you, what's your testimony? Most of us, because that's not a word that we say very often. Usually you say, what's your testimony? It's like a court case, right? Or in our case, you say, what's your testimony? You're like, well, I was 8 years old, and he said, dear God, so I said, dear God, and then he said, I accept you in your heart, so I said, I accept you, and we repeated this prayer. No. I don't want to know when you first stepped across the line of faith and you began to walk with Jesus. What's your testimony right now? Like if someone was to meet you in the break room, they were to text you right now, and they were to say, hey, can I ask you what Jesus is doing in your life? What do you say? And I mean this I don't mean this like a jerk. I mean this because I love you. And if you're like, ooh, well, how do I respond to that? Family, it's probably not because he's not doing anything. It's probably because you're too busy building your own thing. And when we're so focused on building our own things, we have no idea what it is that he's trying to build inside of us. And what we build matters. That's why Matthew 6 says, don't stack up things down here. Store up things where it matters. And we're so sometimes and I get it. Can I say, like, this is a message I've had to preach to myself, and it's probably where the emotion comes from, is that I just know that I'm still in this process, and I'm still trying to give more and more of myself to God, learn more and more what it is to surrender, learn more and more what it is to live with purpose, the kind of purpose that isn't like measured in my paycheck or in the balance on my bank or in how many followers I have or how many likes that I have, the kind of purpose that I just read about in Psalms chapter 72, that I know everything I have, every good and perfect thing comes from you, and I really, really want to make sure this city knows that too. And so, as a story, it's in the book of Joshua, and I told you the second thing that we do is what do we build? What is it that we're trying? What's the importance of trying to build these things? Well, the things that we build is our testimony. And I want to encourage you as you go into this week, like I just want to encourage you, man, ask God. You know, God, reveal to me what you're doing in my life. And you might, if someone were to, if you do that exercise, and if someone was to text you or someone was to meet you in the break room and they were to say, hey, what's God doing in your life? What's the work of Christ mean to you right now? What's your testimony right now? Not your testimony when you were 8, 9, 10, 13, but when you, right now at 60, 40, whatever age that you are, I have a current work that Jesus is doing in my life. If you can't answer that, then begin with the last time that you cried out to him and you remember his faithfulness, and start there and say, Jesus, I don't want this to have been a year ago. I don't want this to have been a 3-year ago thing. I want a story that you're doing yesterday, and then a story that when I wake up today, you're doing a new story in me today, so that when someone asks, it's like, whew, I thought you would never ask. And let me tell you how good Jesus is to me, because in the book of Joshua, that's the way that we make sure that the story, the message of the gospel moves forward. Let me explain it to you. So in the book of Joshua, Moses has passed away, and finally the people of Israel get to go into the promised land. But the thing is, there's a Jordan River that's between them and the promised land. And it's interesting because it's very similar to what Moses faced with the parting of the Red Sea when the Egyptians were hot on his heels. And there's a similar thing. Now Joshua is leading, and he's got to get the people over to the other side. And so God says to Joshua, if you'll take the Ark of the Covenant, which is my presence, if you'll just begin walking into the Jordan River, you'll see that the waters are going to part and you'll cross on dry land. And so they do this, and they cross on dry land. The people of Israel finally, after 40 years, they make it to the promised land. But before they go and they start setting up camp, Joshua says, there's one more thing I want us to do. And that's verse 4 of chapter 4. So Joshua, he called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and he said to them, go over before the ark of your Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, and serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and when it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones that you are building are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. Your kids and your kids' kids, they're going to want to know, what's Jesus doing in you? And Joshua is saying, I don't want to forget. So grab some stones. Let's build this thing so we can constantly go, this is my testimony. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. We want one of those. And so Joshua builds it. And when their kids ask, what is that all about? Oh, sit down. Let me tell you what that's all about. But then Joshua dies. Judges, not instantly. It sounds like he just fell over. No, not instantly. He lived a good life, and then he died. He dies in Judges chapter 2. In Judges 2, in verse 8, we see Joshua died. In verse 9, they hold a service for him, and they bury him. And then verse 10 of Judges chapter 2, after that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or even remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. Why? Because they stopped revealing their testimonies so that everybody could see. They stop saying, this is what our God has done. And when we stop building the kinds of things that point to the faithfulness of our God, we can't expect those that have never heard or have never experienced. They're going to know the goodness and the faithfulness of God because they see it revealed in us. Let me say it again. Culture, those around us, those that are not here yet, they're not going to just wake up And no, they might. That could happen. But by and large, there's going to be generations of people die if there's not people like us building the kinds of things that say, this is how faithful that my God is. The band's going to come up, and I asked the ushers to do something very interesting. The ushers are going to pass out two things, a Sharpie and a Jenga piece. We're going to play an epic game of Jenga. No, we're not going to play an epic game of Jenga and I'm glad I didn't plan to do that because you guys didn't really like Jenga anyways. The reason that we have a Sharpie and a Jenga piece is, like, I want you to consider as my wife and the team sings this next song. It's the song Gratitude. Man, that's like my jam. I love that song. I throw up my hands and I praise you again and again. As the band sings that song, I'm asking, you don't have to do this, but I'm asking that every single person in here that knows Jesus Christ will write something on this Jenga piece that is the testimony that they have. It might be from 10 years ago. It might be from 2 years ago. It might be from yesterday. But I would love it if every single person in this room that knows Jesus would write something on that Jenga piece that says, this is the faithfulness of God that's been revealed to me, that's been demonstrated in his goodness and his just never giving up, never quitting on me. And then as the band sings and you're writing that down, after you write it, I'm just going to ask that you it's going to get awkward. It's going to get clunky, but that's okay. I'm going to ask that you bring it and throw it up here on the stage. You can throw the Sharpie and the Jenga piece up here on stage. And then I'm going to ask probably John Fuchs, he doesn't know this till just now. I'm going to ask John Fuchs to build us something with those. You can do that, right, John? John, you should have been like, absolutely, Dustin. We're going to build something that we're going to put on display in the Converge Center so that when people come in and they see this weird-looking thing made of Jenga pieces with all these inscriptions on it, what we'll know is this is the testimony that God is building in our life. And this is what we can tell our neighbors and our friends and our kids and our kids' kids, that we have something to tell them. We have something that we have seen and experienced in the goodness and the faithfulness of God. And we will have something built. It'll be our Joshua-style monument and memorial that says we have a faithful God. And so if you're here and you don't have that testimony, maybe you're here and you're like, listen, I've never began walking with Jesus. And so I don't have a testimony. Can I tell you that we have a place for you too? Let me just tell you, there's no other joy that I or we as a church would have than to have a quick conversation with you, maybe pray for you as you begin to try to figure out what is a relationship with Jesus. Where do I begin? We would love to walk with you and come alongside of you. So as people are moving towards the stage with the Jenga pieces, my friend Bill, wave your hand, Bill. My friend Bill will be on this side, and I'm going to be on this side. And if you would just like to say, hey, I don't have a testimony. I haven't even really ever walked with Jesus, but I'd like to know more. If that's you, will you come and see Bill or I, and we would love to start today. And then you know what? You'll have a Jenga piece to write down, Jesus Christ saved my life. And that'll be awesome. Father, I pray for every single person that's in this room. God, that you would reveal to us what you're doing, because this city desperately needs to know that you don't quit us and that you are meeting us right in the middle of it, God. Thank you. Father, thank you that the goodness, what that Psalm 72, I tried to blow up my life. My friend Jason would say, he and I would both say, raise both hands and both feet saying, yeah, I tried to blow up my life. I tried to not see your purpose delivered and made visible in me. But God, you wouldn't quit me, and you found me, and you met me. And the more that I tried to run, the harder that you chased. And God, I'm so grateful that you never give up, that your overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love has found me time after time after time again. And it even finds every person in this room here today. And that's what an unbelieving world needs to know. Not just the Bible verses or our way of life or our morality. Know that we have a God that just meets us, and in the messes of life says, I'll find you there, I'll meet you there, and I'll figure it out with you. That's our God, and we want our lives to demonstrate that. So may our testimonies be revealed for generations to come. In Jesus' name.